Welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dickson and I'm a professional sales and marketing recruiter. I love what I do, but my biggest frustration is seeing too many people not realizing their career potential. In this podcast, I'll introduce you to my network, an amazing group of business leaders from the biggest tier 1 organizations through to some super fast growth SMEs. They'll share their career journey and give you unique advice and insights on managing your career and leading a function and a business. Join me, Mike Dickson of AXR Recruitment and Search to help guide your future in sales and marketing. In this episode, I meet Sue Temple, a global superstar of retail, FMCG, category insights, shopper, and loyalty. We chart Sue's career to her current role as ANZ GM of L Founders of Loyalty and learn her career mantra, ABC, ability, breaks, and courage. My name is Mike Dickson, Director of Sales, Marketing and Category for AXR Recruitment and Search. As we get into our 4th year, it's amazing to think about how many senior leaders we've had on the podcast and into the incubator who've given up their time to really open up about their career to help future leaders understand about their own career pathways. Today's guest is someone I've wanted to bring on to the incubator for a long time. So let's welcome Sue Temple, retail, FMCG, category insights and loyalty superstar, and now the ANZ GM of Loyalty Market Disruptor, L Founders of Loyalty. Good morning, Sue. How are you?
Morning, Mike. I am great. The coffee is kicking in, so great to be here.
Excellent. Now, guys, for those listening to the live session, I've jumped up, put the chat facility online. So if you want to ask myself or Sue questions as we go along, please feel free. I'll keep an eye on them. I'll try to ask them as long as they're sensible. In fact, if they're not so sensible, I'll probably still ask them as well, just to create a bit of fun. But talking of which, Sue, let's get into it. As I've been asking everybody the last 2 seasons now, the opening question, I've got a collection growing of what people's favorite brands are and or what your favorite brand is. But again, the caveat being you can't pick a brand you've worked on.
And that's a tricky one, Mike, because as you'll have seen, I've worked on quite a few brands in my time. So I was thinking about this last night and I thought I'd better pick an FMCG brand, given that, that is most of my background. I ended up picking Cadbury's. There's something about, I actually used to live near a chocolate factory in England, and I just love the brand's innovation, constant reinvention, flavors. Some of their activation is very cool. So, and there's always a block of it in my fridge.
Cadbury, see, that's brilliant. We often I find people go a bit as cool as they can with the brand that they like, but Cadbury. Superb.
It's a classic, right?
Love it.
It's a classic.
Great. So talking about, you lived near a chocolate factory, Willy Wonka-esque. But tell us a bit about you, Sue. So where are you from? Where did you grow up? What was life like before we came to know you?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the UK. From a small Cheshire town. So for those of you who don't know where Cheshire is, it's kind of like south of Manchester. In England, big family, 5 children, always chaos in the home. And I grew up really with a kind of philosophy. I guess it was a chaotic household. So it was kind of like make your own way. 5 kids, you don't get a chance to get any special attention. So make your own way. And all of my sisters and brother, in fact, still live within about a couple of miles of where my parents still live, where we all grew up. And yet here I am over the other side of the world. So get that one out.
You've got all the travel genes in the whole family then.
Took everybody's.
Yeah, you've lived in many different places. That's quite extraordinary. They're all within, 4 iron.
Literally, they can pop in for Sunday lunch, cup of tea, whenever they feel like it.
Yeah.
I have to plan my trips a little bit more.
Not quite morning tea whenever you like it, but cool. Well, let's get into your career, Sue.
Sure.
What was the first step? How did it all start?
So where it all began was, as you can imagine, and the reason I bring up my family is because the driver at the time was to get out of this crazy household, get to university, which was in Bristol. And the thing I was good at school was languages. So I did a degree in languages with business studies. And it was the big European dream was happening at that time. Now let's not go there with what's happened since.
Yeah.
But
the dream's died.
the dream got crushed somewhere. But back then, the dream was a big job in Europe. So my first step was purely motivated by, I would like a job where I can use my languages. And I happened to fall into a role with a drinks business. So Allied Domecq, as they were then, it's now parts of their brands are now owned by Pernod Ricard, by Bacardi, by Diageo, by Jim Beam, Suntory, was to be a bilingual assistant for the sales director because he didn't speak any languages. And he was looking after all of the Southern European countries. And I basically got to travel around Europe with him, learning about the world of business.
It's a very cool job.
It was very cool I got to have some experiences very early in my career that I never imagined, like being in a yacht in the south of France, doing some duty-free world exhibition with wines and spirits and swapping for watches or jewelry with everybody wanted the booze, and swapping products at these exhibitions and trade fairs. But I gave my language skills, and in return, I learned all about client relationships and sales and things I never had even thought about, an industry I hadn't even thought about. The pure motivator was to use my languages every day, which I did. Wonderful.
Fantastic. What a great first intro into business, into your career. Did it have you thinking about the future, even those early stages about, well, I'm getting exposure to these different people and different businesses. Those are some of the roles I maybe potentially should be aiming for. Were you kind of a goal setter back then?
No idea. I had absolutely no idea. And I don't mind admitting that. I fell into this role, and then the more I did, the more it kind of things opened up. And that was where I first got involved with category management, which at the time was a project. So some consultant guy came in, and I was asking for more things to do. I was asking for additional responsibilities. I felt like I could do more than be a bilingual assistant. And so I moved. They gave me this consultant to work with and said, go and figure out this category management thing. Because it's like mid-90s. I'm giving away my age a bit here now, Mike. It's like mid to late 90s. And that was where I got involved in category management completely accidentally. I had no idea.
Wow. I remember recruiting in category back then, so as well. And we're all trying to work out in my business back then. So what does category do? It's not sales, it's not marketing. What is it then? And it was really interesting trying to, in the early days of figuring out where's the value.
It was fascinating. And imagine I was working in the duty-free division. So imagine there was a place where you got data once a year.
Yeah.
Passenger profiles from like the airports, scan data from the systems just weren't there to provide data as quickly as we have now and as deeply as we have now. So we used to, it was like, well, let's figure this out. Let's start a conversation with our retailer clients around data rather than just around brands and products and marketing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on your career, whilst you didn't have an idea what was going on, you landed in category, interesting place to be.
Yes.
Was it anywhere to go for advice in terms of, how does this category thing, where does it take me? How do I then start to think about planning my next move? Was there people you could ask?
Yeah, I think because the company I was working for at the time had appointed this consultant, and he was then connecting me. I was like, who else is doing this? I was inquisitive about how could I help to figure this out? I've been given it as a project. And he connected me with a couple of companies in the UK that were a little bit further ahead. It was still very new. But one of them was Unilever, and one of them was Mars, even though I chose Cadbury as my favorite brand just now. And by talking to those guys and what they were doing with the UK retailers, it gave me a way to try to figure out what that could be for the drinks, the alcohol side category, because obviously it's going to be different. And that was probably where I got my first exposure to the broader FMCG retail world, because I feel like I was working in quite a niche area up until that point.
Yeah, great. And when I kind of jump forward, when I look at your career more holistically, Sue, you've made lots of, I think, kind of really interesting, big moves. I want to examine a few of those as we go. So, for example, I look at, when you were at PepsiCo, you were leading the category and shopper function. You'd really kind of developed in that space. For EMEA. You were based in Dubai, so certainly a world away from Cheshire.
Yes, a little bit.
And then you kind of you came to Sydney, which is where you first came into my world, to work for Woolies, to kind of look at the whole Quantium relationship. How do we commercialize that, to revitalize or rethink how they were looking at category management?
Yes.
How did that move come about?
Yeah, I mean, that was been a bit of a theme through my career, has been people and my network. So that completely came about because I ended up at PepsiCo. Woolworths was one of PepsiCo's clients, of course, and the team based in Australia had said, "Hey, Sue, could you come over, help us out? We've got this category thing we're doing with Woolies. We're trying to have a different conversation with them. We need some help, skills." Flew in, went to see Woolies, and realized that the commercial director at the time was my old boss from PepsiCo, who then sold me the story of Quantium, blah, 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 and please come and take on this challenge. And imagine going from being given category as a project and working it out for a duty-free business, 20 years before, to then having to launch a completely new service at a really high level in Australia. There was just a part of me that just could not say no to the challenge, and the opportunity to create something like that was I felt was just a one in a time for my career. So I just had to do it.
Oh, it's so interesting. And a world away from the early days of category.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And in the middle, I think this is what was in it for Woolies, what was in it for me was clear. What was in it for Woolies was someone who had got this global exposure to category management by that point in my career, with probably the top 20 retailers, supermarket retailers around the world, including Walmart, including Carrefour in France, including Auchan, including many of the big global supermarkets, to say, how do we then perfect it for Woolies? Because we've got the opportunity to leverage all that experience. I have to learn the Australian market. I have to learn how Woolies works, a whole new partnership with a whole new agency that I didn't know. I had no idea what I was taking on when I said yes to it. But it's about finding that win-win in the career. There was just a perfect match with me and Woolworths at that time to collaborate.
It felt there was an appetite for overseas talent in Australia at that time.
Yes.
And I mentioned this when I was chatting to Chris last week, who's originally from the UK as well, Chris Walker, who's sales director of Hasbro. In previous podcast guide is out this week if you want to jump on. But one of the things we talked about was there's moments in time where Australia, it feels to me in the time I've been here, almost recognizes, right, we are lagging in a particular space here.
Yeah.
And we're going to accelerate. So we're going to bring in talent from overseas, and Australia goes from being behind, the rest of the world to being at the level and often past the rest of the world quite quickly. It kind of goes through these real acceleration periods. And it felt like that within that category insights space back then.
Definitely. And we saw that in the supplier base at the time as well. So not just what Woolworths was doing, but we saw it in all of the big FMCG suppliers were also, as Woolworths changed, they brought that talent in, or needed to bring that talent in to match. But what I will say is what Woolworths did well was to combine the local talent, what the existing expertise and knowledge of Woolworths, and the business with that overseas talent. So it's never a case of one person. With something that big, it's a whole team effort. There's a lot of people involved, and you need the local expertise and the local knowledge and the experience of the people who really know Woolworths inside out. Yeah. So I think bringing the two together, and it might not always seem that way from the outside. It might seem overseas talents coming in and we're being sidelined. The thing I would say now, Mike, is Australia is really starting to lead. Like, major retailers in different countries now look to Australia, to Coles and to Woolworths for that best practice, and it's starting to flow backwards. So combining the skills, reinventing the discipline, whether it's category management, shopper marketing, data, digital, and then export, that knowledge is now in demand in other countries.
That's fantastic. Guys, then for those who are listening and thinking about your own career journey, then it feels to me that demand for Aussie talent overseas is going to be pretty high just now.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in the obviously our industry, FMCG retail, I'm really saying that Coles and Woolworths, they have, world leading results. They have some incredible initiatives that other retailers just cannot fathom. And we see that in our founders as well. Yeah. That we're now getting approached to say, hey, we've seen Coles doing this amazing loyalty thing. How did that happen? Like, we want to learn more. Yeah. And the GM for our French business recently came out just for that reason, to learn about Australia, all the way from France.
Fantastic. We'll jump into our founders in a second. Yeah. It's a name not everyone will be familiar with, but they will be soon. So you were then promoted to, after that initial role, Woolies, to GM of loyalty, which is and we'll come back to loyalty in a moment. But then you were kind of tempted in the world of agency. Yes. Firstly with 55.5 and then with Nielsen. Why leave Woolies and why move into agency?
I think, again, like I tried to, I always have very clear reasons behind my career decisions. They will not be obvious to everybody looking at it cold on a LinkedIn profile or a CV, but having had that experience, I always wanted the experience of working in a retailer, but it wasn't what I wanted in terms of getting closer to the consumer, closer to the shopper, the behavioural, the research, the insights, which went right back to that first role of category management back in the UK. I wanted to get closer to what could we do differently to better understand consumer shopper behaviours, and how could I now move forwards to reinvent those techniques. Research tools, technology was coming into the world of research very heavily then, and that was the next area that I decided I wanted to get some experience in.
Interesting. So very deliberate to acquire that experience. Yes. To kind of invest in yourself and your learning quickly with the future in mind, because that's the way the world is going.
Yes. And Nielsen in particular took me back to that global world. Yeah. So I had a huge scope of markets and cultures and businesses to then think about how do we deploy, consumer shopper behaviors. How do they differ when you look, at a market like India versus South Africa versus Romania? My remit there went very broad. And that was the inquisitive part of me as well, to really understand those differences around the world. And if my job is to design research that can uncover that, research tools to uncover those insights, then I need to know those cultures and understand how the retail markets work.
It's fascinating because, the scale, guys, is unreal. I mean, you were looking after, initially in that first role with Shopper, leading the global shopper practice, that was 87 different markets. You then went on to lead the consumer insights practice, which was 107 markets. I mean, it seems unmanageable, but so I guess practically, how do you do that? And secondly, what do you take from it going forward?
Yes. First thing is, fastest way to get 1 million air miles, if you ever want to get to 1 million plus air miles. It's tricky. You have to prioritize. So this is something I learned from the ex-CEO of PepsiCo, funnily enough, a lady called Indra Nooyi, who I admire greatly. And if any of you haven't read her leadership books, please read them, because she's very straightforward, pragmatic. But she used to say, look, I've got the whole world of PepsiCo. So think about, I don't just wake up in the morning and pick a country. I have to be very deliberate. Which markets am I getting involved in, with which clients, and why? And how do I then spread the expertise to everybody else? So all of those markets want to feel supported, but realistically, I can't visit 107 countries to help them, and that wouldn't make sense commercially. But how do we distill that learning into training modules or programs, or with a big online learning system that we developed at Nielsen to do exactly that, and engaging with those markets on regular calls or podcasts like this, or to share the knowledge, to share the learning without trying to be there in person, but also thinking of different ways that you could cluster those countries together, right? So. And it was really challenging. I'm not gonna pretend it was easy to do at all, because it really was. Sometimes I'm going to a market like Saudi Arabia, right, where culturally, the role of women is changing there. But the time I was there, you've got all of that happening, and you've got to try and land the business message and meet with the clients. But I loved putting myself in those situations. I really did.
Any countries that you visited, you shocked yourself in terms of, what am I doing here? I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be here.
Plenty. Estonia, Latvia. These are, countries you normally hear about just in the Eurovision Song Contest. Not countries I would have thought I would be in, like, in supermarkets, in these... Russia was a bit of an eye-opener. There's too many to mention, many to mention, but I took something from each one.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, you are the ANZ General Manager or Managing Director for L Founders of Loyalty. It's a new name in Australia. So give me the kind of elevator pitch, first of all. What does L Founders of Loyalty do, and where does it come from?
Yeah, great question. So I'd be shocked if everybody listening to this podcast had heard of us. The L Founders of Loyalty, we're only 2.5 years old globally. We are just 2 years old yesterday, back in Australia. And we are, our goal is to be the world's most trusted loyalty business. And we specialize in loyalty program activations. And again, that's a bunch of words that might not mean anything to people listening. But essentially, the best way I like to explain this to people who don't know is, think about, everybody knows or has experienced a supermarket loyalty collectibles program, be that the recent Coles Magical Builders, be that some of the Woolworths Ushies programs with Disney in the past. We're essentially in the background designing and running those programs for retailers, whether that be a kitchen or a food-based theme, or whether that be a kids' collectibles theme.
Okay. Now, you mentioned globally the business is 2.5 years old. Not many businesses are global in 2.5 years. What do you mean by global?
Yeah, so there was, I should probably clarify that. So global in the sense of, there was couple of businesses that were purchased to be the foundation of L Founders in Europe, one in Italy and one in Germany. And they became merged, their old names dissolved. There was an existing business there in Europe, but there was nothing in Australia, nothing in Asia. So I was approached, I was doing my own consulting at the time, to say, so we're trying to get something going with our founders in Australia. Do you feel like helping us? Do you feel like taking on the challenge? There's no office, no products, no clients. In fact, it's just you. How do you feel about that? So what do you think I said? Of course I said yes.
What was in it for you?
So for me, it almost crystallized all of my experiences to that point. So everything that I had done previously with data, with category, with shopper, with retailers, with suppliers, globally, locally, regionally,
all suddenly came together in terms of an opportunity to, one, feel like I was running my own business, but part of a global, supported globally, a blank piece of paper to really design what that meant. But it was the philosophy of our founders that I really bought into, which was the center of everything they do is data and insights. What is it that the consumer shopper wants from a loyalty program? How would that work for a retailer in changing shopper behavior in a way that is positive for their categories and brands and their business, and matching those to the strategy with the consumer behavior, and then designing a program from scratch. So then it became like new product development. So many different aspects within the one area, the one role. It just felt like it was made for me.
Yeah. And how's our founders been received in Australia? How are you guys going?
Yeah, we're going really great. So, really happy to report that we just expanded. There's now not just me. There's now 4 of us. We do now have an office. We do now have clients. We do now have, products that we've developed specifically for the Australian shopper, the Australian retailer. And we've been really surprised by our results, in just 2 years. The board is happy. Let's put it that way, Mike.
Yeah, good. Well, good working with you on your latest venture soon, and definitely one to watch going forward. And just briefly on that. So the future for our founders, is it about scale? Is it about step by step, fast acceleration, or what's the plan?
Yes, I think we want to grow at the right pace. Like the key thing for us is our founders is we're very focused on that philosophy of data and insights, but the real pillar of our business is people and culture. So we want to preserve the culture, we want to preserve the startup mentality, the startup philosophy, the feeling. So our growth plans are not overly aggressive. We could go and expand and get 10 more salespeople tomorrow and start going into pharmacy channels or pet channels or online or fashion or, loyalty is everywhere right now. Loyalty is the thing that businesses, and I've been approached by some of those businesses, which is lovely, but we want to grow at the right pace and focus so that we don't compromise our offer to retailers, so that it stays high quality, high integrity, and always led by insights.
Right. Now you manage a team of 4 now. That will grow out at the right space. But you've obviously led a variety of different sizes of teams in different markets too. But what's it like working for you?
Yeah, right. Plenty of people you could ask that question. I think I think mostly when I've done like 360 feedback or just discussions with my team, there's a couple of things that come back. One is always it's very rewarding working for me, and I feels weird saying that, but as in it's challenging work, but it stretches and it builds skills and it pushes into new areas. And generally I find that is what people want from a role, like that you want to do your 80% job, but you want to learn new stuff. But I would also think that people say at times it's tough, right? Because I've got high expectations. I do want to push the boundaries. I do want to raise the bar. So, being up for that. But you've also got to be ready to talk about some of my passions, cars, music, travel, countries, no surprises, that it's a very personal kind of environment in that way, particularly with a group of 4. Yeah. Like you are going to chit chat about your weekends. And I think that connection and knowing your people is really important.
And is that different in terms of perhaps leading in a small startup, which in fact what it is, compared to being at Woolies or PepsiCo or Nielsen, where you've got big, complex teams?
Yes and no. I think it gets harder with those bigger organizations. There's just more people, more stakeholders, more contacts. But the more you can build connections and rapport with people, or internally and within a business, externally and network side, the more, even in a big company, it's easier to get things done because people understand where you're coming from. People, don't need to know the ins and outs of your life, but I just found it, again, it was a big thing at PepsiCo about business and people, like balancing those two agendas and making sure that you have a tailored approach, because everybody's different. Everybody likes to be managed different, work different. And particularly when it comes to global teams that might be remote, or local teams where you're all in the same office day in, day out. But that tailoring is the same for me.
Yeah, great. And interested too, so L Founders is going to grow as we talked about. But you've kind of got this disruptor,
yes,
startup. We're the new kids in the market, and we're doing things differently. As you grow and scale, because the business is already a major player in the marketplace, how do you kind of keep that mentality of we're the agitators, the disruptors?
Yeah, I think I'm very conscious of that we don't, as we grow, we grow in the right way. I think our business model will be very different to that of, say, our competitors. And, there aren't that many in this space because it's a very niche part of the FMCG retail industry, but it's a growing part, is that I'm very mindful that we preserve, that approach. We stay true to that. I think it'd be very easy to just start saying yes to what clients want. Could you just design as a loyalty thing that looks a bit like this? And again, I've been on the supplier side there with PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, where let's say Tesco in the UK thinks this is the best idea they've ever had. Just go and make us this. And, and it's centered in insights. It's not going to work. So I think now I'm further in my career, I'm much more confident to have that conversation and push back to clients to say, that's a great idea. However, how about like questioning and thinking? And I'm finding our clients are really valuing that consultancy side to what we bring, and not just saying yes and taking the orders. Yeah,
remarkably similar to our world, Sue. Actually, I think it's very easy to stick to the transaction of what you're doing, but the value comes from the robustness of the conversation.
Yes,
that actually creates a solution that is probably far better.
Yes,
than where you start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Consulting is about taking the start point and moving it forward.
And making it feel like a true collaboration. These programs are really big for the retailers we work with. They move the dial on market share. They're, considering the big companies I've worked for, I'm working on the biggest programs I've ever worked on for a retailer ever in my whole career right now, because of the profile, because of the impact they can have. And so we want to make sure they work. Because if those programs start to lose impact, lose appeal, then, we're not doing the right things by our clients. So it's important to us that like I say, that integrity, that checking. So it really feels like a true collaboration with our clients. And I think it'd be very hard to walk away from that now. Like, I can't imagine trying to work in a different way when that's all we've ever known, so we've created that from scratch.
Right. A couple of questions on leadership. First of all, you mentioned a couple of leaders as we've gone through this, but who are the best leaders you work for?
I would put Indra up there, the CEO of Pepsi. I never worked directly for her, but the philosophy that she filtered through the senior leaders in that business at the time, and how you balance the business and the people agenda, was genuine and true. It wasn't just ticking a box at the end of year or a feedback form, a team engagement survey, or, It was a true people focus. And I would also say I've always enjoyed working for leaders that provide a support, and sort of steering. They give you the guardrails, but they let you go and invent it and create it. And again, there's probably one leader in particular at PepsiCo, Emma DeSuca, who really she was a consumer insight expert. I was the shopper expert. She was my boss, but we had to work super close together. She was like, well, I'm going to learn from you. I'm going to let you go do that, but I'll provide the support around that with senior leaders, for sign-offs or whatever that might be. And that's when I felt like I was really flying, because I had the right environment, the right support, but I was able to create and innovate at the same time.
Great. And if we move into a fantasy world,
Yes.
if you
I'm
could
already in a fantasy world, right?
yes,
Most days.
excellent. If you could pick anybody in the world to work for,
Do you know what? I was thinking about this yesterday, and I feel like I should pick someone like some big figure or someone famous. And then I went, do you know what? I would love to work for some 2 or 3 people who previously worked for me, who've gone on to be big leaders, great inspiring leaders of their teams. And I've seen them like pass that down. There is nothing better, more rewarding than seeing someone you've helped go on to be that. And I'd love to experience it from the other side.
yeah. Any shout outs?
Well, anybody listening in who used to work for me who wants to take that on. I'm going to say John Loder, who's currently at Woolworths, or has just moved to a big role at Big W. He's someone who I'd love to work for, because I see how his team grows and develops, and I think it'd be wonderful to see that from the other side.
Fantastic. Great. Well, John, you know where to come. Fantastic. Now, you've led large and small businesses, as mentioned before, domestic, global, a real variety. So when you, on the kind of talent career advice lens, looking at how organizations hire, first of all, what do you think are the common mistakes organizations make when they hire?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake I've seen along the way is just hiring like for like, the same, like the matching of the profile. And as we know, business evolves, industries evolve, things change, and the skills that were right 3 years ago when you last hired that role are maybe not the skills you need 3 years later. Clients change, everything changes. So I think that's sometimes a big mistake, that there's too much similarities, not enough diversity of thought happening. And diversity is obviously a big topic on its own, but I'm talking diversity of styles, diversity of skills, diversity of, it might not be the perfect match for now, but you've got to hire for the future. So you can't just hire the skills you need for that client right now. What's it going to be in 2 more years, 3 more years? And I've seen candidates or people come into those roles, get frustrated, get bored because they don't get anything new, and you don't get the growth in the agenda or in the business because you just got the same skills you had previously. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
Often organizations, when we're working through a brief, there's a kind of desire to kind of challenge and change and create diversity, but also the sometimes there's a natural conservatism as well.
Yeah.
To hire in your own image, that kind of unconscious bias.
No, so I've ended up hiring into L Founders. I've hired a guy who was in fashion for like 8 years, who had no idea what FMCG even stood for. And a guy who was working in kind of movies, kind of entertainment world. And then more recently, someone from FMCG to kind of balance out the skills of the whole team. Because I think that's the other part of it, like thinking about the sum of the parts, not just each role individually, but what's going to then galvanize that as a team, not just, one role at a time, particularly in a startup where there's only 4 of us. We all need to have multiple skills and support each other. But I think taking a risk as an employer on someone like that, in a typical recruitment process, the guy from fashion might not even made it to the shortlist, right?
Yeah, I think the recruiter has a challenge in their hands persuading the hiring manager or talent team.
I certainly did.
Yeah. To look beyond the obvious.
Yeah. And, he's now been with us a year or longer and, absolutely flourishing, doing an amazing job. It's almost like this role in this industry was made for him, and he would never go back to fashion, ever. I hope he doesn't.
Yeah. And where have you seen recruitment done particularly well?
I think where it's done well, it's done with time and care and planning, and it isn't just a X roles to fill, big reshuffle, restructure, whatever. That it's got a you've got more you've got a broader consideration or a broader group of stakeholders as well, so that we take time hiring to. There's a few stages to it, but it's different purposes for different people, for different parts of exploring for us and for the candidate.
Yeah.
So it has to be both.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's processes are thorough, but they're thorough and repetitive, and that's not actually giving anybody anything new or different.
Yes.
You have if you're going to interview somebody 4 times, then don't interview them the same interview 4 times with 4 different people.
Yes.
Make sure every stage is going to be unique
Yeah.
and give them a different lens, a
Yeah.
different perspective, and
Yes.
you're going to give them a chance to show their capability and potential in a
Yes.
different way as well.
Yeah, I mean, before I took on the role at L Founders, I probably met 12, 14 different people from the global part that had existed before. There was a couple of people at that point in Hong Kong. It was a long process, but I understood why, and as much for me as for them. But I think other places I've seen it done well as well, when there's an element of risk taking, of that we know that's not the perfect fit for now or for what the previous person in that role was, but this is the right person for going forwards, and that was on the basis of which I hired a lot of people into Woolworths as well, with that different background to balance out what we actually needed to achieve.
Yeah.
But recruitment's tough, and it can go wrong,
Yeah.
and but you learn from that and you move forwards.
Yeah, great. Flipping around, let's look at the individual. Now, you'll have worked with many people who really maximise their potential soon, and some who don't. They end up underperforming in terms of their career. Are there common mistakes that people make to kind of slow them down or not realise their potential? Do you think?
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a lack of exploring, like what's possible or what are the other options. I think it's like driving, right? I put the car analogy into this. Like, you set the sat nav and you go, I'm going to go from A to B, but along the way there might be some nice sightseeing detours that you want to do, and that adds to the journey, and it adds to you still get to the end point, but you go a little bit haphazard, versus just saying I'm only going to go straight down the M1 and that's it. And I think a lot of people look at their careers sometimes, particularly see it in sales and marketing, where I'm a product manager, now I'm going to be a brand manager, then I'm going to be a marketing manager, then and well, it's not as much fun, I don't think. I mean, I can't say I didn't do mine that way, as you've seen. I can't imagine that, you get to the senior levels, you haven't got that breadth. And as soon as you get to the executive levels, you need to be able to understand all the functions, including HR, finance, sales, marketing, whatever.
Yeah, completely agree. There's been a common theme of this podcast series is actually when you unpick your career. So Chris's career last week, all the 60 odd guests we've had on, no one's followed a linear path.
Interesting.
To get to senior leadership. I don't think you can.
No.
I think you have to do it differently.
Yeah.
You get stuck really early. So to me, there's one overarching thing around career planning is look for lateral experiences.
Yeah.
To use your car analogy, sat nav analogy, A to B via 1, 2, X and Y is a lot more interesting.
Yeah. And figure it out as you go along.
Yeah.
It's almost like I see it as, there's a bit of a blocked road there, so I'll go here for a bit. Yeah. Or, no, there's a diversion there. They're doing roadworks. I might go that way. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody talking about your career is a function of ABC. Has anybody used that before? So, and this was something that I must have been in my head from very early in my career. A is ability. So always keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding your skills. B is breaks. which come accidentally, haphazardly. For me, the Woolworths one, somebody, something pops up. And the C is the courage to take those breaks and to take those chances when they come along. And that ABC of career has done me pretty good so far.
I love it. Okay, that's a really good takeaway. So finishing up, Sue, you've achieved loads in your career so far. Love getting to know you over the last 10 years plus. But do you still have career goals? You still look forward and have things you want to achieve?
Yeah, I think I actually got more career goals the more my career progressed, because the more I knew, the more I wanted to then achieve certain things. I think more recently, at this point in my career, it's actually now about building the business for success, like actually setting up a business that can run without me almost. So like kind of planning for my, what's next, and setting up the team here to run, independently. I would love to get more involved in then at board level on certain, things to do with data and insights in particular, and people. I still think there's a real, there's so much value that I think I could bring there because of that background that I have, being so different, but also all those cultures and countries. And, I feel like boards in Australia are still struggling a bit with that. So my goals are, but they're vague. They are there, but they're pretty vague still, as they've always been.
Well, you've done all right so far. I'll point you in the direction of Cheryl Heyman. She was on episode, I'm going to say early 30s. She is an NED, serial NED, and so she's come up a marketing route. And we talk about the whole pod is around the shift from the ELT to the board.
Yes.
What's that like? How do you make it happen? How do you kind of create a portfolio career? So super interesting episode for those of you who are also thinking one day I would like to be on a board. How does that happen? And it's hard work, but very rewarding. And it's a very practical episode and actually what's involved.
Yeah.
When you're sitting on a 5 or 6 different boards, and it's
I'll take a listen, Mike.
I'll send you the link.
Put it on the list.
Definitely.
But otherwise my goals are just to continue, add value, making a difference to people, making a difference to the business, making a difference for clients, consumers, shoppers who experience our loyalty programs, so that we bring really cool, fun, exciting stuff forwards and continue to disrupt loyalty in Australia.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see where L Founders goes next. Working with you guys so far has been brilliant. Lots more to achieve. So thanks. That was brilliant. Thank you for sharing insights, your career, where you are now, leadership. There's a lot we covered. The session will be on our podcast. If you want to re-listen and you're on the live session, Your Future in Sales and Marketing next week, listen on all your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Google, and Apple. We'll be back again in 2 weeks in another live session with, I think, a rising star of the sales director world, Claire Waite, who is sales director at Abella. That's Abella Dips and Sauces, actually a joint venture with PepsiCo, that business. Mm-hmm. Now, meanwhile, if you want help defining your own career goals or some coaching and how to maximize career conversations, reach out to me, any of my team. We've got loads of assets that can help you, salary guides, guides on how to interview, how to get the most out of LinkedIn, loads we can do to help you guys. So reach out anytime. Thanks again, Sue. That was awesome.
Thanks, Mike. Enjoyed it. Could have talked for another hour, probably.
Easily. So for me, Mike Dickson, have a great day, guys. All the best. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more inspiring journeys and advice from Australia's sales and marketing leaders. You just can't get this career insight anywhere else. My name is Mike Dickson. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.